We're live. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today, both those of you who are here watching live and those of you who will enjoy this on a rewatch. We are recording it for our online resources. So I am Dominic Mundy. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Spa and Pool Association. And on today's webinar, we have David Fellman. Dave's a regular speaker at the Pool and Spa Show. Some of you may know him, maybe even have seen him down there. Professionally, he is an author, he is a consultant, and he is someone who helps small businesses grow. He's a popular speaker who has delivered seminars and keynotes at events across the United States, Canada, England, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, I kind of want your miles. It sounds like you've got a few. Dave's a great guy. He's done some presentations for our Penn Jersey chapter as well. And today he's talking about building teams in your workplace and building your team up. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave. He can introduce himself more and get started, and then we'll do some Q&A after that. So Mr. Fellman, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Dominic. And it's worth mentioning, I think, I have more than 2 million miles just on United Airlines, but all that really means is that I've been locked into little seats and flying tubes for an awful lot of hours in my life. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of elements of team building and then open it up for the Q&A. And I'm going to set up my screen to share for you so you can see some of my PowerPoint graphics. And I want to start by just mentioning that people in business have been talking about team building for a very long time. A man named Peter Drucker, who's pretty famous in American business, once wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal. And in it, he wrote that the results of all of this team building have not been overly impressive. And you might be wondering why I'm including such a negative statement in this conversation we're going to have. Well, it's because Drucker was pointing out a problem, but he also had some solution. And he went on to explain that the results of team building haven't been all that great because most managers seem to think that there's only one kind of team. And Drucker went on to explain that there are really three kinds of teams that are relevant in American business, particularly in small business. There's the baseball type team, which he compared to an assembly line. There's the football type team, which he compared to a symphony orchestra. And then there's the tennis doubles type team, which he compared to a jazz combo. So we've got the baseball type team. The players play on a team, but they don't play as a team. Think about baseball. Think about assembly line, where each person has a fixed position and a specific job to do. So what is it that we most care about in terms of this baseball type team? Well, we need to have somewhere between a minimum of competent and ideally all-star performance from every member of the team. In other words, we want people who know how to do their jobs and do their specific jobs well. So then let's think about the football team, and let's think about the way a symphony orchestra works. Everybody on the football team plays a fixed position. Everybody in the orchestra plays their own instrument, but there is a much, much bigger element of interaction and support here. I mean, ideally, the center snaps the ball, the left tackle blocks the defense, the quarterback has time to throw the ball, and the result is a completed pass. Or else the horn players play their part, and the string players play their part, and the percussion players play their part, and the result is music to our ears. But see, the critical thing here is that without the play or the plan, it doesn't work. Somebody has to direct the football type team, the symphony orchestra, and make sure that they are Well, you've heard the expression about being all on the same page. I read this once, and I really fell in love with this analogy, this sort of vision that without the play, without the plan, a football team is a collection of mass and energy without direction, which is not a recipe for success. And then we've got the tennis doubles type team, which Drucker compared to a jazz combo. So here, in both that kind of music and in tennis doubles, the players have a primary position, starting position, but they don't stay there. In tennis, the whole idea is that that one player moves to support the other player as the point, as the action develops. In jazz, it's kind of a follow the leader sort of thing. Each of the players takes turns doing a solo, being the leader. And when they're doing that, everybody is trying to support them. There's an element of partner here that I want to get to, that I want to get back to in just a moment. There's also, though, a critical element of anticipation and understanding. The best players in tennis doubles and in jazz music, they know their partner. They know the people that they're playing with, and they can anticipate what is likely to happen and get into position to support it. Now, this element of partner, I believe that you want to have a partnership. You want to begin a partnership, maintain a partnership with every one of your employees. I'm not suggesting that it has to be a completely financial partnership or even an equal partnership, but you're all working toward the same goal. You want them to be engaged with you. You want them to feel like more than just simple employees. I want to tell you a little bit of a story about how one of my clients got to effective leadership and team building and management, specifically in this regard. Rock Parker is not his name. This is one of those situations where the names have been changed to protect the innocent. But Rock was one of those guys who he didn't micromanage. What he did was over manage. By my definition, by the way, micromanagement is a good thing, because my definition of management is simply to make sure that everything from the little things to the big things gets done and gets done right. Managing on a micro level, managing the little things, I think is critically important. Having said that, I think that over managing is a really bad thing, a level of management that just isn't necessary. And that was Rock. He was an over manager. He wanted everybody to check with him before they did anything. And the result of that was that Rock spent all of his time managing all of his business, every single decision. And the simple situation there was that he did not have time to do that, because he needed to be spending some of his time. I bet you've heard the expression about how you don't have time to work on the business because you're always working in the business. Rock needed to spend his time doing more important things. So here's what we did. I encouraged him to at least start empowering his people to make their own decisions. And the way we went about that was, the next times that somebody came to him, that one of his people came to him and said, all right, what do you want me to do? He would listen to the situation, and then he would say, if I wasn't here to tell you what to do, how would you handle this situation? And they would tell him, which gave him the opportunity to say either, oh God, no, don't do that. Let me tell you what I would rather have you do. Or, surprisingly to Rock, and much more frequently, what he found out was that he had smart people working for them. They had good instincts. They knew how to handle situations like this. From previous experience, they even knew how Rock wanted them to handle situations like this. So he found that 70–80% of the time, he was able to say, that's it exactly. And you know what? Next time a situation like this one comes up, you don't have to ask me. Just go ahead and handle it just this way. So each of the situations that came up became either a teaching opportunity or an empowerment opportunity. And before long, Rock Parker had a lot fewer people standing in line to ask him questions about how to do things. He had people doing their jobs, anticipating and understanding what he would want them to do. And that left him with much more time to work on improving the overall business. Now, another couple of thoughts on how to build yourself a bigger, stronger team. It starts by evaluating the skills and attitudes of your people. Goes on to whatever training and attitude adjustment is necessary. And I also want you to consider the issues of engagement and addition by subtraction. But let me come back to that in just a moment. Here's how you evaluate your people. First question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the performance of your best employee? All I'm asking for here is sort of a general evaluation of how happy you are with this person and the way this person does his or her job. I don't even really care what criteria you use. It's purely subjective, one on a scale of 10. Now, though, I want you to be a little bit more specific. And using the same scale of 1 to 10, I would like you to evaluate that employee in terms of job skills, of which there are likely to be several, job attitudes, of which there are also likely to be several. Things like initiative, work ethic, trust factor, communication skills, potential for advancement. I am not suggesting, by the way, that this is your list or this is your final list. What I'm hoping to do is to give you a starting point, but start thinking about, all right, what skills and attitudes do I care about? What skills and attitudes are necessary for success at this particular job? And then picture this list of 1 to 10 with a 1 to 10 number next to each one of them. That's going to tell you something about what your people are best at and what they're not so good at. And then you'll have a much clearer idea. You'll have much better visibility into where they need to improve, specifically where they need to improve in order to be better team members, better at their jobs. Now, I don't think it'll surprise you to know that I'm asking you to start this with your best employee, but continue with every one of your employees. Evaluate each one of them and figure out what training might be required, what attitude adjustment might be required. But I do, before I move on, want to mention one interesting thing that tends to happen when I do this evaluation with my clients. Almost always, what happens is that the initial 1 to 10 score, the first score I asked them to give me, just a general rating of satisfaction, ends up being higher than the average of the individual skill or attitude ratings. In other words, everybody seems to think initially that their employees are doing a little bit better job than they're actually doing. It's been interesting for me to watch the way this happens. All right, so what comes next after that? Training, if that's necessary. Attitude adjustment, if that's necessary. Working with them to get them to be more engaged in their jobs. And that raises a question too. Are you people are your employees, your team, are they really engaged in what you're trying to accomplish, in your goals for each of them, for the company as a whole? Or are they just showing up to do their jobs and get paid? I don't know what training is required. I don't know what attitudes need to be adjusted for each one of them. But I do want to suggest this. This is sort of an engagement conversation. This is actually something that I got from one of my clients. She sits down with her people once, sometime in the first 2 or 3 months of employment for a new employee. It was 5 or 6 or 7 years ago when she first came upon this strategy and started doing it with her longer time employees. But she would sit down with a conversation with them, and she would give them a piece of paper that basically looked like this slide. It had 4 lines on it. I want you to, followed by a line for a blank. I need you to, I depend on you to, I trust you to. And this was basically a fill in the blanks exercise with each of her employees. And she found that, especially the first time around, she had to spend some time explaining what she was trying to accomplish. But basically, she was giving her employees the opportunity to tell her what they want from her, what they need from her, what they depend on her for, and what they trust her to do. This all started with each individual employee. And that gave her a sense of what these people were thinking about how well the company worked from their perspectives. And she listened in these conversations. She took notes in these conversations, and she universally came away feeling that she knew this employee better after these conversations. And then she turned the tables on them. She had prepared herself in advance for this. After listening to the wants and needs and depends and trusts for the individual employee, she came back now and said, all right, this is what I want from you and what I need from you and what I depend on you to do and trust you to do. So the end result was 2 people who understand each other a lot better. I want to suggest this model for you as an engagement conversation. One more thing I want to talk to about as we get to the end of this brief presentation. The last step here in building a better, stronger team may be addition by subtraction. So let me ask you to consider this. You probably have some really good people, some good people, some not so good people, right? You probably have some people that you're going to give low scores in their evaluation, in your evaluation of their skills and attitudes. You probably already know who your weak people are. I promise you that your best people also know who your weak people are, who your worst people are. And I also promise you this. If you tolerate bad behavior from any members of your team, that affects your ability to lead and manage the rest of the team, your top performers. That impedes their ability to fully trust you. Sometimes the best thing you can do to improve conditions for your best people is to get rid of your worst people and replace them with better people. All right, closing thoughts before we get to some opportunity for some questions, some answers. 4 fundamental truths, and the first of them is, if your people already knew how to do all of the things you want them to do, they might already be doing all of those things, right? If they're not already doing all of those things, it may just be because they don't fully understand your expectations. So any skills or knowledge which are necessary for success, but not currently present in one of your people, those skills, that knowledge has to be trained in. And on the attitude side, any attitudes which are necessary for success but not present in a current employee must be motivated in. And then finally, let's consider this. Engaged employees, fully engaged employees, real team members, real partners, they take less and they contribute more to a business, but it is not up to them to engage with you. It's your responsibility as the manager, owner, manager, leader, whatever word, whatever term we choose to use. It's your responsibility to bring them along with you to where you want them to be. Again, engaged employees, fully engaged employees, take less and contribute more. And when I say take less, I'm not talking about stealing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about taking less of your time, of your management time, training time, motivational time, and contributing more. I think the possibilities there are pretty straight evident. All right. Before we go on to Q&A, just the one last thing. When I spoke at the Pool and Spa Expo in Atlantic City a month or so ago, I offered you a special offer on a couple of my books, and I'm happy to extend that offer to anybody watching today, watching this recording. If you're interested, go to my website, www.davefellman.com. Scroll all the way down on the homepage and just click on the NESPA logo, and that'll take you to a page where you can buy my books. Thank you for your interest maybe in that. And now, who's got questions?
So we have a few people on, and we'll see if anybody comes up with some questions. I'll start first by saying that I have a bunch of, I'm actually looking at my bookcase right now and have a bunch of business related books. And some of the best ones I have are not your good to greats or, you know, the seminal books. I have those as well, but are books I purchased from speakers that I saw because you make that personal connection. Like you hear the person speaking and then you read what they wrote, and often those individuals are more available if you have a thoughtful question, things like that. So everybody should consider taking advantage of Dave's literature there. I'll ask you a question first, and then we'll see if any come in. First, you talk a lot of you weave engagement into. I even see it's one of the titles of your books into that, and I think sometimes it's easy to think that, especially when you're busy and you know our industry, it's hyper seasonal. You tend to get into these crunch times where management is finger pointing and telling what to do. I don't mean finger pointing, blaming. I just mean do this, do this, do this, do this. I don't have time, right? And then a whole season goes by and you're not checking in. How with all those lists and everything you shared, how effective can you be as far as efficiently engaging, right? So you don't have a lot of time. You've got a couple minutes at the beginning of the day, end of the day, everybody's out in the field working. Do those engagement moments have to be big sit down meetings, or can you get what you need to learn about your employees and help the good ones succeed and manage the weaker ones kind of in quick moments, or, you know, kind of through efficient communication?
You absolutely can. The best recipe, in fact, is a combination of, let's think of it in terms of events and opportunities. All right. Events would be, yes, a sit down meeting. But think about the kind of things that you could do that might even combine some of those things. Lunchtime, for example. I work with a guy. One of the books is called Rules of Engagement, and I wrote that book with a guy named Brian Adam. We were actually on the same program. We spoke on the same program 5 or 6 years ago, and he was talking about employee engagement. I was talking more about customer engagement, but he was talking about some of the things that he does in his company. Once every 2 weeks, he would put a little lunch together. Generally speaking, people from one department, but for a pool contractor, it might be the team or one of the crews.
Right.
And instead of just sitting around and eating lunch, he would have an agenda. He would say, let's see if we can get some business improvement done while we're having our sandwiches. So tell me, from your perspective, what are we doing well? And is there anything we're not doing well? And if I made you manager for a day, what would you do? These meetings can end up being a lot of fun, especially if the manager who's running the meetings has a sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in some of these things too, which were, if you'll forgive me for using the word, they could have been bitch sessions, but they turned into laughing sessions with people literally ragging on each other, making fun of each other, and having a team experience. That sort of thing can happen. And then think about other opportunities. Brian told a story about at the beginning of every month, he buys himself 25 $5 or $10 gift cards from McDonald's, Wendy's, Starbucks, places like that.
Right.
Places where $5 or $10 is enough to go in and get something. And his goal is to hand one out every day, at least one out every day, to go out onto the floor of his plant, his factory, and catch somebody doing something good,
Right.
so that he can thank them and reward them. And in addition to being a team building opportunity, it's also how do you say it? It's almost a negotiation opportunity, because think about the situation where you got a person who's a 6 in some area, and you want to get them to a 7. All right, when you feel you've got them to a 7, that's an opportunity for a little reward and reinforcement that we want to go to the next step too.
Right.
What a great opportunity to build some momentum.
So we have a question that revolves around, I believe it was the point you made about some addition by subtraction.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get more out of your better team members if you remove a bad apple. My phrasing, not yours. If one of the biggest struggles in our industry right now is the lack of available labor overall, not in any one company. That's a challenge that all trades and are seeing. Certainly, it's a problem in the pool industry. So, what's a suggestion you might have for individuals in that situation? Right, you probably need 2 more people than you have. Getting rid of a person or 2 is not really an option from a purely operational, functional perspective. But yet, what you're saying, I think, resonates. Right, that idea of you don't want to come across as supporting bad behavior, because that's going to diminish the productivity and spirit of the folks who are performing. Yes. So any suggestions or thoughts on, getting rid of someone is not really an option right now, but I do still want to lead better, manage my team overall better. What are some thoughts on how to work through that situation?
It's a 2-part process. The first part of the process is to recognize that I have a problem. What I would really like to do is to replace this bad apple with a better apple. All right. Then start looking. And I know that that pretty much everybody in the industry right now is looking all the time. but let's look forward to a situation where the labor situation may not be quite as desperate as it is now, or look retroactively back to a time when there was plenty of people to do the work. Too many owners, managers, they just tolerated the bad behavior. I'm saying let's do something about it, and let's start the process of trying to find a replacement. I don't recommend biting off your nose to spite your face, right? To fire somebody and be even further behind the 8 ball in terms of staffing. But let's start trying to do something about it from the replacement perspective, and let's also be serious about trying to improve that person's attitude and performance. Here's another an example. It's not as happy as an example as giving somebody a gift card for performing well. But let's say that that you got a bad apple, and let's say that having completed the 1 to 10 evaluation, you know exactly what it is that makes this person a bad apple. I would guess that it's probably deficiencies in a couple of areas, right? Either lacking in skill to do the job, bad attitudes that are or poisoning the organization somewhere else. I'd sit that person down and have a conversation and say, listen, I rated you as a 4 in this particular area. Let me tell you why. And now let me tell you, let's talk about what a 5 would look like and what a 6 would look like. You know, what you have to do to improve a little bit. So here's what I propose to you. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, some period of time, over this period of time, let's work on improving your attitude. Let's work on improving your skills. Let's see if we can't get you from a 4 to a 5. And then we'll start talking about getting you from a 5 to a 6. It has become my motto that better is better. You can't, there's no snap your fingers solutions to get somebody from being a 4 at something to being a 10 at something. But better is better. And if you can create even gradual improvement, you can also sometimes build momentum and turn somebody into a better employee. And now I'll say something that is often considered controversial. I love the idea of bonuses for high-performing employees, because those have proven to be motivators to continue that good behavior. I am also willing to consider bonuses for poor performing employees. They say that money talks, right? If I got an employee who's a 4 and I want him at a 5 or 6, and he or she is asking what's in it for me, all right, if you do this for me, I will do this for you. If we had a surplus of people looking for these jobs, it would be pure stick, right? Either you do this or I'll fire you. We don't have that situation, so maybe there needs to be some carrot. You do this and I'll reward you for it.
That also can lead to creating, even if that person, let's say, doesn't stick, okay, fine, but putting some of those things in place can lead to a culture that helps retain your good talent, and even just anybody that you want to keep around and keep some of that decision making in your hand. And 2, that's what you want people saying when they're out and about in the industry, right? You should work here because they advance me, they take care of me, they engage me, things like that. That there's money talks, but people like to be happy where they are as well.
That's right.
And
That's right.
those practices help create that image and that culture.
Brian had a statistic in his presentation, and we later put it in the book, that engaged employees are, I don't remember the exact number, I want to say 34% more likely to recommend their company as a place to work to another engaged person.
Right.
So yeah, there's an awful lot of upside to being good to the good people.
Well, David, we don't have any more questions from anybody phoning in. I've asked you a couple. Is there anything you want to add to wrap this up before we come to a close?
Um, yeah, there is something that I want to add. Um, I wrote an article for a printing industry trade magazine a month or so ago, and it was asking, did we learn anything? Have we learned anything from the last couple of years? And the sort of stimulus for this article was something I read in the New York Times. I read this article about how the global supply chain crashed, and the article pointed out that just-in-time manufacturing, which was pioneered by Toyota, 30 or so years ago. The idea of having everything show up in terms of inventory, in terms of parts and supplies and stuff like that, just before you needed it. That strategy worked extremely well until it stopped working completely when the whole supply chains crashed. And that got me thinking about the print industry had particular issues with paper and ink. They're still having trouble getting paper to put their ink on. But even with all of that, the bigger problems that they are having and that most businesses are having are with human resources, are with people, because the supply chain for people for staffing is really thin. So what I said in the article is I compared company A and company B. Company A spends $35,000 a month, I think was the number, on payroll for 8 exceptional people. And the work gets done efficiently and effectively. Company B spends $30,000 a month, less money every month, on 10 not so exceptional people, more people, but not as talented. And I granted that when it came to a point where they had to lay off some people, they were actually in better shape because they had more, people, it was obvious who to let go. But coming out of that, the company B is in better shape because they got better people and they're better positioned to recruit better people. Being willing to pay more is critical now. And I've heard people say, well, I can't pay X number of dollars for people to do that particular job. All right, that's bad thinking, especially for these times. And I also want everybody to consider this. You don't actually pay your people. Your customers pay your people. And there is evidence that your customers will pay more for the quality of work and the service provided by a company that is made up of better people. So what I'm saying is, you may have to pass that cost along to your customers, and that's inflationary, and it's probably not all that good for the entire economy. But I'm not worried about the entire economy today. I'm worried about each of your individual companies. And I'm saying that it seems to be working in the microcosm. Pay more, charge more, and everybody ends up with a benefit. I'd like everybody to think about that.
Excellent. That's a good point and a good thing to leave on for everybody to sort of evaluate in their own businesses. So I David, this was great. I appreciate it. Third time you've done a presentation for NESPA in the last month. Always well received. So thank you for making the time, for doing this today, for entertaining some questions. Again, David Fellman, with David Fellman and Associates, www.davefellman.com. It's on the screen. It'll be in the notes. Thanks everybody for joining, and for everybody who's watching in the future. Hope you enjoy this. And yeah, thanks, Dave.
Thank you all.